Well, I accidentally had the Sunday with Charles open. It should have just been the music.
That's all right.
Because it's not Sunday,
It's
but
Sunday
it is
somewhere.
Charles, so it's sort of halfway there. We're closing in with Charles Ortel today, the new midweek show that we've put together that confusingly to many is live streaming on the 21st Century 3D YouTube channel. Do you know why that is, Charles?
I shudder to think.
You know, Charles, there are malicious individuals in this world who, all joking aside, they don't want to see real information come forward. They don't want me to be doing shows with you about the crimes of Robert Mueller, the alleged crimes, the alleged obstruction of justice, Rod Rosenstein, the inappropriate relationships that these individuals may have had with former presidents, with aspiring presidential candidates. These malicious individuals do not want the story of Harmon Wilfred coming to light. They don't want to hear about the clandestine black ops banks that Harmon was involved in setting up. They definitely don't want to hear about the multiple individuals that were murdered to prevent that story from coming forward. And so these individuals think it's funny or clever to put strikes on videos, on Crowdsource the Truth, on Crowdsource the Truth 2, and then we can't live stream on those channels. So we've got 21st Century 3D here, we're live streaming here, the videos will be uploaded later elsewhere, and we're gonna continue to take measures to circumvent this ridiculous capability that Google and YouTube enable through their bizarre and very possibly unconstitutional policies. Alex Jones had a press conference in Washington, D.C. yesterday that I attended, and I was very impressed with Alex and his crew. I always liked InfoWars. Alex is a nice guy, a lot of energy, and he reiterated that these were unconstitutional things. I need to get the specifics on this, but he said that I think in order to achieve a certain tax status or a certain business qualification or whatever, YouTube and Twitter had represented that they were public utilities in a certain way.
Oh yeah, well that's...
And as so many people want to do, they want to gerrymander the Constitution and the laws so that the parts they like apply to them, but the parts that they don't like don't have to apply to them. I think we deserve to face our accusers. If someone wants to strike a video and say that it violated something or other, we should know who that person is, what the violation was, give us an opportunity to avoid doing it in the future. But I don't think that Google or YouTube necessarily agree with that, so we'll have to just keep making new channels.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, it's the people who are responsible for this policy, not just at Google, but I think at Facebook we're learning, and at Twitter and other places, don't know their history. It's proving that the educational elites are not serving we the people all that well, because if you really want to understand why freedom of speech is protected in the United States of America, you've got to go back and study the Virginia Statute on Religious Liberty, which was authored by Thomas Jefferson and became the bedrock principle that was incorporated into the Bill of Rights. The idea is, I remember in college there were these horrible neo-Nazis campaigning in, I think it was Winnetka, Illinois. And the American Civil Liberties Union actually rushed to their defense.
Yep.
And I had a very hard time understanding that until it was explained to me that you're allowed to make very controversial speech, short of saying, saying there's a fire in a movie theater when there isn't one. You're allowed to say controversial things, and the public at large is then encouraged, if somebody's saying stupid things, to rebuke that person on these mediums. And that's the compromise that Jefferson thought was a lot smarter, thinking, more recently at the problems that Galileo had. I mean, had we listened to Galileo a long time ago, maybe we'd all be a lot better off. And it's the ideas that upset the deep state, upset the establishment in both political parties, upset the status quo in the universities. These are the ideas that actually should be considered, because more often than not, ideas that are very productive in the long run are extremely controversial in the short run. And you would have thought that here these mavens out of Silicon Valley who are supposedly so brilliant at Google and elsewhere, these geniuses who are running universities, you'd have thought they'd get that basic premise, but they don't. Instead, what they want is they want a limited pipeline to consumers. They want consumers to basically give them all of their stuff for free in exchange for a service that's not all that valuable. And then, accept the idea that the people who are giving away their valuable information, are so stupid that they will then accept that these people who have no experience in news, no right to curate, are heavily biased, are in favor of ideas that frankly I don't think make all that much sense. Those people would then restrict access to content and validate content, not giving the people a fair bit of understanding of their own biases. So, I think you've come at this at a very pivotal moment, and it's actually in some ways good that it's happening now as we go. I mean, it's painful, but it's some ways good in that. We had the show on Sunday. We talked about Diamond and Silk, and they turned that one around. Apparently today, our friend Marsha Blackburn grilled Zuckerberg. And that senator, I think it's Tim Scott, the black senator from South Carolina, he just was justifiably on a high horse. How can you say that these two black women are a danger for, criticizing the status quo? How can you say that, particularly now?
Mark Zuckerberg crammed in on the stand. He was like, hamana, hamana.
Sitting on his 4-inch high cushion.
Oh, yeah, that was so funny. The whole thing is bizarre. I mean, listen, I absolutely stand by the strikes that I have issued to other YouTube channels because, you see, I don't believe it's within someone's right of free speech to accuse another person of crimes falsely in public. I think that's not allowed, if I'm not mistaken. And I also don't think you're allowed to instruct people to do illegal things like kill all police. That's not freedom of speech.
No.
Yeah, but I mean, the other things, we need to do probably a primer on freedom of speech and send it to Mark Zuckerberg. And I got more of an issue with YouTube than I do with Facebook. All of our stuff is still available on Facebook, still available on Periscope. I really would encourage anyone who's watching who's maybe had some difficulty in finding Closing In episodes or Sunday with Charles episodes or any of the episodes we're doing on Crowdsource the Truth, to get onto periscope.tv/CSTheTruth. You can see all the episodes there, totally uninterrupted there. And of course, patreon.com, Crowdsource the Truth, is a website where people can become both recurring sponsors of the program and watch all the episodes on there. The irony for all of these people that want to strike the channels and try to impede our progress is that it's actually caused more people to go to Patreon. So strike away, I say. And we'll just, what did Jay Leno used to say about Doritos? Crunch all you want, we'll make more. We'll keep making YouTube channels, I don't mind.
Well, I also think that these recent actions by the elite, the social media elite, and by the mainstream media, I would say they're crybabies in the mainstream media at this point, embarrassing, is creating a business opportunity, I think, for us and for people who want to get to the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to hear nothing but garbage, it's a very simple thing to do. You turn on CNN or MSNBC.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right?
Yeah.
If you want fake news, spend whatever it costs now to get the New York Times or the Washington Post, and the story will be late. It'll be slanted. It'll be wrong, and a lot of these great policy minds who wake up in the morning and get the crack of 10:30, show up at a government office and, look at the digestive news stories from the New York Times, the Washington Post. These are the people that have missed out on a tremendous amount. And on the other hand, I think people are very adept with computers. People are frustrated with what has happened since, really, I'd say 2001 to the present. The young student type people who have student loans, are in the gig economy as opposed to making real decent money, who are anxious about what could happen to the stock market and to if they have investments, to their investments.
It's more like the megabyte economy. The gig economy has gone down.
Kilobyte economy. But
no, Charles, we did an episode earlier today with David Hawkins of the Able Danger Worldwide Intelligence Network. And we were talking quite a bit about fake news, actually. David takes a very unique approach to investigating these things. I was asking him about what he thought about all the anti-Russian information and this deal with the Novichok gas. They said that was coming from Russia, but of course, David points out through his research into the patent office, which is controlled by Serco, a British company, controls the US patent office. Did you know that?
You mean is what, the contractor organizing it? Or?
We'd have to consult David to find out the specifics, but he knows a lot about this company, Serco, and his investigative process involves searching for patents related to Novichok, and he's discovered that the university, Northwestern University in Chicago has developed all these antidotes to Novichok, and during the years that they were being developed, he determines how could you develop an antidote to a chemical if you didn't have that chemical. So the conclusions of whoever in England decided that only Russia has this Novichok seems incorrect. And furthermore, Craig Murray, who
he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. The geniuses over at the unintelligent American media network decided that he's dead, but he was actually on RT just last week talking about the specific language used in the British press, how the gas was of a type developed in Russia, etc. And now we've got these Syrian gas attacks. It's the same thing again. Right. They can't come up with even anything new, and people buy it. Why is Trump sending the USS Donald Cook and all these other warships to Syria and tweeting about an animal using gas? I mean, it seems so obviously fake.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we've seen in recent years, when we have tragedies, the mass shootings, the one out in Las Vegas, and other things like that, there's an immediate rush. Whatever the conversation was before the shooting, suddenly it's, we got to get your guns. We got to stop these, people who have guns.
Right.
We take those guns away. And then the second there's a tragedy in the Middle East, it's right away it's Russia.
Yeah.
Or in, the thing in the UK. And I actually was interviewed this morning on it for Russian State TV talking about this, and they were saying, and I don't know if it's true, that there's very little security for Skripal in the hospital now, which strikes me as incredibly odd. I have some experience actually providing, investing in a company that provided services to hospitals in the UK. And, we were told the security was pretty tight. You have to be very careful in hospitals. Actually, if you want to get sick, a great place to go is a hospital, because a lot of time in the UK, because a lot of times, diseases are there in the alleys and the highways and byways inside the hospital. It's tough to root them all out.
Wow.
There's some drug-resistant strains of various bacteria. So it's not necessarily crystal clear that you're going to advance your health case by going into some of these hospitals.
Right.
But if you have something, coming in presenting with, in theory, the results of having been touched by a toxic poison,
right.
You would hope that person wasn't just put into the emergency room next to a coughing baby. They're segregated in a special part, and you would think, given the guy's prominence on the world stage, the fact that maybe the Russians are still gunning for him, maybe other people are gunning for him, that it would have some security.
Right. I mean, the fact that he was poisoned, certainly you could arrive at the conclusion that somebody's trying to kill this guy or get a little security on him.
Well, that's what we were talking about a little bit on TV this morning, which is, if you think about these crazy stories. We've got the Steele dossier,
yeah.
We've got the provenance of the Steele dossier, which still is not explained properly. We have this unnatural relationship and alliances between elements in the UK who might be left-leaning, the Clintons, the Obamas, maybe Democrats and progressives. We've had 8 years. We had 8 years under Brennan with the CIA. Who knows, what he changed in the CIA and what the NSA people changed in our long-standing relationship with the UK. In the UK, it leans to the left. It is not. Their conservative party is pretty left-leaning.
Right.
And the major cities are left-leaning, et cetera. So would it shock me to believe that once it became possible that Donald Trump might actually win, that a secret plan was put in place to try to embarrass him, and that things that our government officials couldn't do, either contracting out to U.S. firms, they did in league with, people in the UK or are either in the government or contractors to the government or retired in the government, trumping, as it were, trumping up charges. That would not shock me in the slightest, particular. And I'm no expert on intelligence. I mean, I like to read spy novels and stuff. I've done that for 40 years. And I actually collect first edition spy novels. But, the notion that there could be double agents in the US and the UK is not a big stretch.
No, not at all.
And so who does it suit? Who does it suit to have continuing hostility and violence across the world? It suits the big defense establishment.
Right.
And there are big defense contractors in the UK and France, of course in the US. So it suits the deep state to have hostilities. You got it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we've heard, of course, from Harmon Wilfred how the reach of the Five Eyes coalition between the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia has touched him in 3 of those 5 countries. And another central focus of my conversation with David earlier this afternoon was his assertion that MI6 is essentially the deep state. Like, that's where it's all being coordinated from. The British Empire sort of never lost hold, and he goes into some details how this company, Serco, the biggest company you've never heard of, and their control over the patent office and manipulation of various patents allows them to get into all kinds of things. But perhaps we should take a look at what may happen and what has happened and what will happen.
Only after we congratulate the art department again.
Yes. Well, thank you.
And I have written a piece I have several pieces in Life Set, which interestingly, that's Laura Ingram's original creation. And I believe she now is working very closely with a wealthy Canadian, a Canadian billionaire is now, I think, in the driver's seat.
Not Frank Giustra.
Not Frank Giustra.
Good.
And I was speaking to Mark Tapscott, who couldn't be on today, but wants to be on next week. And he was explaining that they're under a denial of service attack, which is infrequent, he claimed. The intensity was pretty high. And I think what's really going on here is that in this long-standing conspiracy, that is an actual conspiracy, the kind you can indict if you ever get your acting gear, Mr. Sessions. What we have here, I would argue, and I think you agree, is something that dates back probably as far back as 1988, maybe even 1981, where people in both parties, Democrats and Republicans, began to realize that this is a great game. That the government's throwing out these gigantic purchase contracts for defense munitions, and gigantic contracts in healthcare and other ways. So if you can insert yourself for a modest expenditure into the arms of a politician who's going to become a crack addict for money, campaign contributions, he or she will need that money. If you're in the House, you're going to need it continuously. In the Senate, you're going to need it every 6 years. If you're running for president, you need it every 4 years.
Yep.
So you know that these people are going to need your money, and the amount of money that you have to come up with to purchase influence, let's say, with a politician, you never really own a politician, is trivial compared to the amount of money that you can glean off a crooked deal. Take the stimulus, 800 billion or whatever it was, 787 billion that we know about, the recent omnibus spending bill, these various bills. You're talking about decisions get made where people can make tremendous amounts of money. And then the crumbs that you can throw, you see this modus operandi where generals and politicians, they leave. Paul Ryan's going to leave. He'll get on the board of some big corporation. He'll be on some investment firm. He'll be doing speeches. His wife will get a deal. He could do a book deal, movies, whatever. And for the people playing that game, even if you have to pay a John McCain $100 million, you'll get, and I'm not saying somebody paid him $100 million, but even if that's the amount of money that you have to pay or send towards a politician, we're not talking Clinton style. We're talking just, JV McCain stuff.
Or if you just need to hire a professional aircraft carrier saboteur, John McCain's your go-to guy.
That's right. Yeah. Look, I can drive this thing. Not so much.
So, everything that you're saying actually reminds me of a show we did yesterday with filmmaker Greg Levitt, oh, I hope I'm remembering his name correctly. He made a movie about the horrible situation that veterans are facing and the recovery that some of them are suffering through after being subjected to improperly, basically, they're burning garbage in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they did it for years and years. And what happened was KBR and Halliburton and these various contractors to the US government, which coincidentally are tightly linked to Dick Cheney, they were just disposing of human waste and plastics and chemicals and all kinds of crazy hazardous material in these burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I mean, the multiple myelomas, the incredible rare diseases and cancers that the veterans are suffering from now, and they're not getting proper health care treatment. There was one veteran in the film who had a
very squeamish.
Yeah, sorry. The guy can't eat. He needs to eat liquid food, and the VA won't pay for it. And this is a guy who went to Iraq ostensibly to protect our freedom or whatever they told him. And in the end, they destroyed that country. They achieved no useful objective. And I'm talking about the leaders, not the soldiers and the people that went there. But this is basically lifelong torture that these individuals are suffering. And it's all about money. They said that they just didn't set up these incinerator machines because it would have cost too much money.
Well, going back to it a little bit, we're sitting here as we speak, wondering whether, Russia and the United States are actually getting in a shooting war.
Yeah.
And again, going back into history, into why the Constitution was set up the way it was, the hope of the framers was that if we were to go to war, that people would think very carefully about starting a war.
Yeah.
And the idea was that the House of Representatives, being closest to the people, would be the body that would have to originate a bill declaring war. And we've gone from that, and shame on under Bush and even before that, but under Obama, the kinetic military adventure, that's what they call it. It's not a war in Libya, it's a kinetic military adventure.
How can they actually say that?
They did. They got a sanitation engineer to bring the garbage out, clean it up, and turn it into a kinetic military adventure. Wow. But these people here, Mueller, Rosenstein, and Comey, and there are others, many others, have basically been the chief, I jokingly refer to them as law non-enforcement officials, going way, way back. When Bob Mueller was proffered to us as, he's going to be the special counsel, he's a war hero, Purple Heart, Vietnam Marine, and all this stuff. The second I heard that, I said, wait a minute. We got to look into this guy a little bit more carefully. And we've been at this now for a while. It takes us, I think, we spend a lot of time on this. It takes people who understand finance and law and charity fraud and corruption a fair amount of time to appreciate the full extent of this massive mess. But we're now at a place where the wider world is getting it.
Yeah.
And I think these strikes against you and Google and wherever, on YouTube, the LifeSet stuff, the fact that it's tough to get into mainstream media, I think makes a tremendous amount of sense, alongside the fact that the general public, there's recent polls coming, they don't care about Stormy Daniels. It's like 22% of the country cares about it. It's a problem for the Melania and for Barron and for the Trump family and all this kind of stuff. But it's not as serious as thinking about, the fact that under Barack Obama, our national debt doubled in 8 years to almost $20 trillion. And what did we get? We didn't even get a freaking T-shirt for all that. And we're still at war.
Stupid.
We're still at war. The Nobel Peace Prize winner, gets that in his first 10 days on the job. He gets the Nobel Peace Prize to stay at war for 8 years. And so the functionaries in all this, we had Robert Mueller, head of the FBI, September 4th, 2011, right the way through September 4th, 2013. He was, as the FBI was mounting, and it quotes, investigation of obvious Clinton Foundation fraud, he was briefed on July 30th, 2002. How do I know that? It's in the FBI vault file. We talked about it. I've got another piece coming, laying it all out with links. So he knew all about this. The man who was in charge in the Department of Justice from 2001 to 2005 for prosecuting tax fraud was Rod Rosenstein.
Mm-hmm.
He's a summa cum laude graduate from Wharton, according to his resume. He understands math. He understands the law. He should be able to recognize the tax fraud when he saw it.
Yeah.
And instead of recognizing it and prosecuting it, what Mueller and Rosenstein and Jim Comey, who first was the actual line U.S. attorney, taking over from Mary Jo White by January of 2002, he was the one who could have put the Clintons away in 2002. But somebody chose not to do that, to spin wheels for a long period of time, and they let the Clintons off right before November 18th, 2004, when this massage parlor opened in Little Rock. And with that step having happened, actually, they were then off to the races around the world. Next thing you know, that's hundreds of billions potentially when you consider all the strands of it, hundreds of billions in charity fraud, and the people who are responsible are these bad fellas, Mr. Mueller, Mr. Rosenstein, and they're trying to protect James Comey, and they're doing every dirty trick in the book that they can to try to ensure that real prosecutors who don't have clouds, who aren't allied to the Bushes, the Obamas, or the Clintons, that real people who love the law look at this file. When you look at this file, I mean, one thing we haven't even really gotten into yet, these people have never filed a compliant tax return. Forget the one they missed.
Clinton Foundation you're talking about.
The name of the Clinton Foundation, the legal name of the Clinton Foundation from October 23rd, 1997 until April 25th, 2005 was the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. It wasn't William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. It wasn't the William Jefferson Clinton Presidential Foundation. No, it was the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. And that's important in charity land because they force you to pick one name and they force you to list all the other names that you could be using. And in certain states, you're not allowed to do that. In other states, you can do it. But you have to disclose all this so that regulators can see, hey, these people are out there with their tin cups collecting money for HIV/AIDS internationally when all they're supposed to do is run
mini golf and
a library and catering service and in Little Rock at a research center. I mean, you can't tell that if you allow these people, these very creative namers, to come up with all these absurd names, this initiative and that initiative and something else that sounds too good to be true. If it's too good to be true, it isn't true. So Mueller is, I forget he's a lawyer, Rosenstein's a lawyer, and Comey are all lawyers. At high level.
Sorry, liars?
Yeah, and they're high level people, right? I mean, Rosenstein is the most powerful, he's like the chief operating officer of the Attorney General's office. He's the guy who makes who decides which laws not to enforce.
Right. Charles, the more time goes by, the more crazy stuff is coming out. I don't know if you have yet had a chance to see this article that's just out in True Pundit from the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, I presume, talking about how McCabe and his wife, the woman who ran for state senate in Virginia and got over $1 million apparently from Terry McAuliffe, they were neighbors for years with Bill and Hillary Clinton, according to True Pundit and our friend Thomas Paine. The friendship spans decades before McCabe cleared Hillary in the email probe. So people can go on to True Pundit and read about that. But we're getting kind of a lot of insight into the inner workings of the interrelationships of all of these crooked people and how deep that runs. I mean, they're scratching each other's backs. And when you go back, see, most people, when you say, oh, it's a criminal operation, they're so jacked into CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Compost and MSNBC and all that, they think it's ridiculous. But when you consider the Clintons' involvement with Mina Airport and the Iran-Contra scandal and the importation of literally millions and millions of dollars worth of cocaine, one of the most horrendous crimes you could imagine. Dangerous drug dealing, gang wars, all kinds of stuff that brought about. Not to mention the chaos on the streets, the DEA, the funding, tax money. I mean, they are absolutely the worst criminals. I mean, John Gotti and Tony Soprano and all the Godfather movies are like, Mickey Mouse compared to this.
But Badfellas,
Badfellas.
Goodfellas. I think there was a character in that called Jimmy the Gent Conway.
Right.
And here we go, Jimmy the Gent Comey.
Right. That's
Same
right.
idea. Who's going to? I guess Rod Rosenstein would be played by Joe Pesci.
Yeah, exactly. What am I, a clown? I amuse you. So Charles, you've prepared a slide presentation for us as usual.
Fancy that.
To discuss these bad fellas.
Yeah. Well, why don't we jump to the next page?
Okay.
So we put up here our standard disclaimer, and we had a viewer contact us after Sunday with an email making a point about, or trying to make a point about our comments on Mueller, our comments on Mueller's possibly taking uranium into Russia. And the point there, dear viewer, and thanks for bringing up the criticism, we're going to do an extensive, long show on it, is just to say that the full tale on what was going on in the Bush years and even before the Bush years, especially in the Clinton years, what was going on as the former Soviet Union imploded.
Yeah.
What representations did the United States government make under Bill Clinton to the former Soviet Union leaders, and then to the leaders of the emerging states in Central Europe and the Russian Federation and elsewhere? What representations did we make about the ways in which we might work together to, for example, destroy chemical weapons in, I think, that facility in Georgia? What representations did we make about whether NATO would try to expand eastward and bring troops eastward? And did we honor, did the West honor those representations? Or is it possible, is it indeed likely that what may have happened is that corrupt people across the world looked at the breakup of the Soviet Union and said, this is a time to steal as much as we can possibly steal.
Cha-ching.
Yeah, ka-ching. And they got on their circus trolley or whatever. They went around the world. There were jet planes, Epstein, Juster, and all this kind of stuff. And so the issue to focus on Mueller is not so much the incident of him being in Russia, if he was there. Maybe it was entirely legitimate. No, the issue is with him, what in that long period of time, 2001, September 4, forward, when he was head of the FBI, how effective was our counterintelligence, counterespionage group in the FBI? Who was in that group? Was Peter Strzok eventually in that group? Did McCabe have anything to do with that group? And how many crooked deals were concocted in that long period of time? And why were decisions made, as apparently were made, when this American, this Campbell fellow, got involved and realized it was money laundering? He approached the FBI and apparently said, hey, there's a real problem here. And the FBI said, well, why don't you stay on the inside and we'll uncover this? Why did it take so long to uncover those problems? What was really going on? Who gave the high sign to Justra to go try to get as much uranium as he could around the world?
Yeah.
How much of a project was that? Was that just a Canadian project? Was that done with the connivance of Mr. Downer, perhaps, in Australia, another important country? Who in Russia may have been involved with this? Who had the contacts with Kazakhstan and elsewhere? What was really going on there? And we're not getting, it's not like, we signed up after September 11th, 2001 for a new deal where, the rights that we used to have in the Constitution, you can forget about those.
We didn't sign up for it, but we got that deal.
Yeah, or the responsibilities that government officials may have to tell you the truth, well, you can forget about that, because now what we're going to do is we're going to manufacture this continuing set of tensions where we're going to encourage you to surrender more and more of your freedoms so we can do more and more crooked deals in private to make us richer and richer and richer. And that, I think, is essentially what has happened since September 11th, 2001. And people on the left, the Berniacs, people on the right, the Trump supporters, people who don't care about politics, they can tell this isn't right. And they're searching for a way of making it right. And what we see is now the response of the deep state. The deep state gets it. They are terrified, I think, of what will happen once the truth becomes known of what actually has been happening since, I would argue, 81 forward.
I think people are starting to know, Charles, and that's why we're seeing all of this really aggressive activity to try to shut down the truth. But you know, it's important for people to know that the playlist on the original Crowdsource the Truth is still available, and people can still, even though we're not live streaming to the original Crowdsource the Truth channel, people can still catch up on all the episodes of Sunday with Charles. They're all in here, and you can just go over there to the channel is officially called Jason Goodman, but if you search for Crowdsource the Truth, that's the original Crowdsource the Truth channel, where you can see we were on Crowdsource the Truth 2 for a little while. We're just going to keep hopping around channel to channel. They can't stop us by sending these, you know, wacky morons who make crazy threats over the internet and try to stop us from doing what we're doing. It's just not going to work. So
You got to stay one step ahead of the outlaws.
that's exactly what we're doing. And you know, people should also, they should go on Twitter and follow Charles Ortel. He is just at Charles Ortel there, and he follows me, so he knows something. This is a very humorous article.
Yeah, I put it up right before I came over here. I mean, this is just, you know, that's not the most attractive visage, but you know, she makes up for it for being such a diplomat. Punches her husband in the face because he's not being affectionate.
It's pretty funny. I don't know. Maybe the problem is something other than what she realizes.
Yeah.
But
So
back to the slides.
yeah, so if we could just go back to a page quickly.
Sure.
So for the new viewers, our approach is that we actually care about source material, and we try to provide you with as much of the source material as we feel we can go over in a presentation. These presentations can run to 2 hours and longer, and you know, we get cutting them down and down and down to numbers of slides. We're down to like 3 real slides, and sometimes it can take us 2 hours just to go over them because there's so many links. But what we were trying to do here is to stimulate debate, to get the smart people who are out there in the crowd to think more deeply, and that's indeed what they do. I get emails, you get emails, people are acting on this information. Thank you for contacting Congress people and governors and presidents and other people around the world. I think it's really working.
Yeah.
And that I think does underscore why various actors are coming after you, coming after LifeSet, coming after anybody who might dare speak the truth.
Yeah, because of course, if it were ineffective, or if Crowdsource the Truth were not a credible source of information, no one would pay attention to it. The fact that all of these people want to work so aggressively to shut it down, particularly at the moments that they're shutting it down, when we pass other sites that are quite clearly disinformation in terms of the number of subscribers we have. Of course, I revealed in that interview with Douglas Gabriel that he's obviously lying and spreading false information intentionally. That cratered their subscribers while ours started to climb, and so they had to take, I'm not saying they did, but possibly supporters of theirs, operatives of theirs, maybe them, had to take action to slow our momentum. They did not want Crowdsource the Truth to hit that magic number of 100,000 subscribers, which we were barreling towards, and you know, that's fine. We'll get back there.
We'll get back there, sure.
Yeah.
And what I would say is kind of like we're the obverse side of the coin of the Hillary Clinton principle. You know, she gets tremendous amounts of exposure. Whatever she wants, she can go on whatever television show, whatever speaking tour. She's going out to New Zealand.
And she still loses.
And it's the obverse side, right? We want her to speak as much as possible everywhere, you know? Because that helps us, I think.
It does. All right.
So,
what actually happened this past week? Charles, there's a lot of stuff going on, obviously. War fomenting over there in Syria. Hopefully that won't happen.
well, yeah. So the situation in Russia is indeed quite, with regard to Russia, is quite tense. And I think if you go back to the recent history of U.S. relations with Russia under Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, relations were tense. The reset button was ridiculous. It doesn't help to go and get your top State Department foggy bottom people to give the Russian leadership a button that says overcharge instead of reset.
How do you screw that up?
again, this is the pretenses that come out of these State Department people. You know, they're so noble and so wise and so sophisticated and so nuanced. Don't trouble me with any report cards. I'm off to Geneva, you know, to get some new, to sample the latest white wine out of the Alsace region. I mean, it's just, it hasn't been working, and I think we went way down a line. People in the FBI, I know we talked about this before, were warning that maybe the Skolkovo project was sending too much in the way of advanced military technology, possibly the hypersonic plane, missile or whatever. And you know, that didn't work so well after, especially after the craziness in the Ukraine, escalated tensions. I'm still not satisfied that we understand precisely why Russia soured. Our relations with Russia soured in the 2011 timeframe, and then really went the wrong way starting in 2012. I'm not exactly sure why that all happened, but if I had to guess, it probably involves people like Sidney Blumenthal and these shadow operators who were out trying to concoct deals, and those deals didn't work, and for whatever reason we shifted course. But in the more recent period, we had the episode, I think it was last year, with the gas in Syria.
Yeah.
I was not satisfied with the analysis, I mean, such as there may have been on CNN and elsewhere, about the source of that gas, about the motivations of the people who may have dropped that gas. And now we're back at it again with this Skripal incident in the UK, where it's, it just strikes me as extremely odd that the smart people, and there are very smart people in Russia and in the United States, that they would have said, oh, I think it's a good idea to poison some former people in Salisbury, which is sort of the heart of the rich part of the UK. That's guaranteed to provoke some kind of a response. And for that reason is not something that I would imagine Vladimir Putin's people would ever try to put in place. On the other hand, if you ask the age-old question, who benefits or who stands to benefit from it, anybody who wants to keep the deep state employed benefits from a theory that we're about to have two nuclear-armed powers duke it out in a conflict that could escalate and very quickly around the world.
Yeah.
So
there was a very good segment that I saw last night with Paul Joseph Watson and Syrian Girl. Have you ever seen Syrian Girl?
No.
She's an independent journalist. I think she was a YouTuber. She might have been kicked off of YouTube, but she's a very good reporter, very intelligent and good analysis on the ground there in Syria. And people can search for that, Paul Joseph Watson and Syrian Girl. They were talking about how, basically Assad had won the war, the United States was pulling out, Russia was pulling out, everything was settling down. Why would he gas? I mean, it just doesn't make any strategic sense, even for a maniac. People just say, oh, he's a maniac. He's not. Even if he is the worst ruler ever, he doesn't want to do something that's going to guarantee his own destruction. Why not just bomb those people if he wants to kill them?
Right, absolutely right. And you think about it, again, you ask that question, who stands to benefit? The people who are going to be hurt most by any kind of a peace deal in Syria were these rebels, the al-Nusra people, and these various...
But aren't they just working for the real people who want to take over the natural gas business in Europe, who want to unseat Assad and remove his secular Alawite government and install some radical whatever?
I think they're radicals for hire. I mean, you pay, it's like I was talking to these people from the Philippines, and they were actually family friends or whatever. They were saying, when the missionaries would go out to remote parts of the Philippines, they'd come into some little village in the middle of nowhere, and they'd say, who wants to be a Methodist? I'll be a Methodist, and the Methodists leave. Who wants to be a Catholic? I'll be a Catholic. It's just give me some more food or whatever. The same idea in the Middle East. I mean, there's not much to do in Syria, right? You can make those Damascene swords.
Oh, come on. There's got to be Damascus is not it's not Chicago or something, but it's not a cosmopolitan city at all.
It's one of the world's oldest and most cosmopolitan cities, but there isn't, world-class service, world-class manufacturing, world-class music. There might be some good restaurants. I don't know about it, but I mean, it's not like the place is set up.
Paris.
Yeah, or Manhattan or whatever. It's not like it's set up to be competitive on in the globalist world, where companies like Google and other big companies like that can attract the best and the brightest minds from around the world and move at, warp speed.
Google Syria,
Whatever.
headquarters over there.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like Google's going to move from 14th Street over here.
Well, they're moving Syria to Google, and they go shoot up the office over there. Where was that girl from? Iran, I think.
I forget where she was from. But anyway, maybe if we just jump back into the slides a little bit. So I found this next, we came up with the idea of BADFELLAS before I saw this next story, but this is rich. I mean, this is really rich. Apparently, in an interview with George Stephanopoulos, Mr. Tall and Mr. Short are getting together here, and Comey supposedly in this interview compares Trump to a mob boss.
Yeah, well.
I mean, seriously, you're going to go there, Jim?
I don't understand why James Comey is a dope. Your nickname for him is excellent.
Yeah, dopey Jim Comey.
I love all the pictures. He's got like flies coming out of here.
It's time for the Obama fly to superimpose the Comey fly.
Unbelievable.
But honestly, I mean, you look at this guy. He cleared. I believe he played a hand in clearing the Clintons over Whitewater, right? He was on top of the investigation into finding. It's not complicated. We've actually had new teams look at this and from different perspectives. And when you look at the stuff, you don't have to go get a subpoena. You don't have to do much. You just go and you say, all right, let's find the stuff that's in the public domain. It was in the public domain, the tax return. Find me the first year's tax return.
You're talking about for the Clinton Foundation.
Right. And it's rich that this interview is coming out on April 15th, tax day.
And to promote his book, no doubt.
Yeah.
The interview America's been waiting for, it's James Comey speaking to Stormy Daniels.
That's right.
And they're not doing it just for the money.
Yeah, exactly. But, you just look at the record that's out there, and you cannot find, you've got a tax return there for the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, but that's not the name of the charity. There's no audit for it.
William J. Clinton Fraud Foundation.
It's with the word "the" in it, and there's no. I mean, it's just they break almost every important rule that's out there. They break, and the files are right there, and you're the FBI and you're the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, and you spend 4 years on this, and you don't come up with anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just you're going to call Trump a mob boss? I mean, this guy he's a disgrace, Comey. He's not just dopey, he's disgraceful, dopey James Comey.
A disgrace would be if he was such a dope that he couldn't find it. But as you said, it's far too obvious, and there's far too many points where they didn't find it. It can't just be dopey. It's almost so much evidence they have to have knowingly done it. I forget, we'll go into that later. Right. We'll keep you going. I don't mean to break the momentum.
That's quite all right. So this no-knock assault against Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's personal lawyer.
Terrible.
It's the kind of stuff that happened in East Germany. Yeah. Under the Stasi. This is not something that any thinking person should believe is a good idea. And just look. I like to examine things by contrasting them. So you contrast the way in which Mueller, and I would argue his criminal associates, are trampling over the law, and aggressively going after Manafort first, and now this guy Cohen. Contrast this approach with the approach that dopey James Comey and Loretta Lynch took with regard to the investigation of Hillary Clinton's email scandal. You've got to put the two up and compare and contrast them. Here you're saying that that Trump may have been involved, or this guy Cohen may have been involved in something that is. He
paid the porn star $100,000. Who cares? Why is that national security?
I don't know. Why is it?
It's attorney-client privilege. Isn't it? Let me ask you something. If he did have sex with a porn star and say, "I tell you what, here's $100,000. Don't say anything," is that inherently illegal?
I'm not a lawyer, but the way
doesn't seem like it, right?
It would depend on many levels. Like, did she declare it as income? Did she fail to declare it as income?
That's her business, though. In other words, paying someone to not talk about something, is that illegal?
I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know the answer to your question, but
And even it is, unless she's Russian, what's the difference?
that's right. But more for the the principle this sets. I mean, if you're gonna say that it's all right, here we have in Mueller somebody who has conflicts of interest. I think undeclared conflicts of interest, massive undeclared reporting to a guy Rosenstein who has even bigger undeclared conflicts of interest, and Mueller has not been Senate confirmed. Rosenstein is not supervised by Sessions. So we've created...
Because he recused himself?
Right. We've created this rogue person with so many defects in his record, Rosenstein. We have not appropriately examined his wife and what his wife may have done in the Clinton administration, whatever personal arrangements and friendships they may have, their political interests. We have not examined how Rosenstein cleared Hillary Clinton in the travel office investigation, I believe.
Ooh, that was when Bill was president.
Exactly. And so we haven't looked at that carefully. And when we look at these Clinton Foundation frauds, a big element of the fraud, in my view, is allowing the foundation to pay for travel expenses that shouldn't have been paid for by the foundation, because the foundation was supposed to focus on Little Rock, Arkansas, full stop. It wasn't supposed to go flying around the world. There's been no oversight of the travel the vendors of travel services in these books. We don't know their names. It's implausible to me that a travel agent would not be one of the top 5 contractors to these Clinton charities, because they spend so much money on charity. I doubt they disperse the spending to 50 different local travel agencies. They're probably using 1 or 2. And so there's no oversight. And there's one narrow thing. Rosenstein clears Hillary on the travel office stuff.
How do we know that? I'm looking for articles on that right now.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was the travel thing. In January of 1998, I believe, Rosenstein interviewed Hillary Clinton for 15 minutes. And subsequently she was cleared.
I'd love to find out more about that, because there's clearly a lack of reporting on that.
Yeah. So anyway, in the case of contrasting these two, if we go back to the headline for a second, the people are coming out of the woodwork and saying, hang on, this is a very dangerous precedent. Let's say, that Hillary continues her tremendous good work, and the mainstream media does their tremendous good work, and you end up with a veto-proof majority, conservative Republican veto-proof majority in the Senate, and an increase in power in the House in 2019. Does the left really want this precedent to stand once they clean House and Justice? That this is what you can do, that you can go after in a trial, you can get a search warrant somehow. And originally, the lie that was sold to us originally was, well, it was a Trump appointee who blessed this search warrant. Well, that's not true, as we're going to show in a second. This is a precedent that is abhorrent. It makes no sense to me. Whoever is supervising this, Rosenstein, should be immediately, I think, terminated.
They say that he personally approved this raid.
You're stealing my thunder.
Perhaps, sorry, it was you who said it.
That's okay.
I didn't mean to do that.
It's okay. So we can go to the next slide. In CNBC, we did that one. Yeah, CNBC is alleging that on the one hand, Rosenstein actually personally approved this raid. And for that, I'm sorry. I mean, this is not, Rosenstein has got so many problematic aspects, in my mind, in his quote resume. The travel office thing being the first, and then we go his failure to prosecute the Clinton Foundation for 4 years when it was obvious.
Yeah.
His subsequent, role. What was he doing in connection with the trucking thing? His failures to discipline Laureate. His failures to discipline Ramboksi as harshly as should have been disciplined. His failures on the Clinton-Bush-Haiti thing. This is not somebody who has just, 1 strike against him. He's got 9 strikes against him already, and now this. And I'm sorry, I don't understand, why this person was selected. I just don't get it. I don't understand who vetted him. I don't understand who pushed for him. I don't understand who's protecting him. And I think, Rosenstein has done a lot of damage already, and it's past time for him to go.
We were hearing rumors that he might be fired. That can't come soon enough. What's going on with that? Nothing today.
Well, could be happening as we're speaking. What's happening is happening while we're happening. I
hope that it is.
It would be great. Be great.
But see, I guess the problem that they're trying to create for Donald Trump is that if he fires any of these guys, then they'll say, "Oh, see, he's guilty. He fired him."
Well, again, we're sort of like in the zone where, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day or whatever, right? I mean, it's just, you got these pundits who take Bill Kristol, you know, who used to be amusing 20 years ago and now I think is completely needs to change his medicine. You know, there's just a whole bunch of people who don't like Trump, will never like Trump. You know, Trump could give every one of them $1 billion each personally and say you don't have to pay the taxes, and they still wouldn't like Trump because he's increasing inequality. But, you know, that chattering class, I think you're never going to persuade many of them, and there's no use even trying to, you know.
But Charles, this is a counterintelligence operation, right? These guys are intelligence officers or whatever, intelligence operatives, and the Steele dossier, that's all counterintelligence, basically fake operations. And they love this move to create a situation where whatever you do, you look badly. If you do the right thing, oh, you're doing that because you're guilty. If you fire the guy, they'll presume you're guilty. If you do nothing, they'll keep coming up with fake stuff and raiding your lawyers until they have something else to say you're guilty about.
Well, again, we're talking here about the President of the United States. We're not talking about, you know, just somebody you meet in Central Park and have a sandwich with, maybe at a table. You're talking about somebody who has the right, was elected with a mandate, a far more convincing mandate than Bill Clinton ever had. Bill Clinton, you remember, he won with less than a majority of...
Because of Ross Perot.
Because of Ross Perot.
I voted for.
Yeah, I know. That's why I brought
keep
it up.
on slow dancing.
And another thing.
He's still alive, I think.
Is he really?
I think he's like 90-something. We should interview Ross Perot.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. But anyway, so one story says Rosenstein was in charge of this decision, but another one, this Daniel Greenfield is a pretty good guy, I think. I don't know if you've ever seen him front page. He's claiming that this fellow here, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Kazumi or something like that.
They got a lot of crazy names.
Yeah, Robert Kuzami, who is an Obama holdover, may have been the person who actually pulled the trigger on this move. And there's a lot, when you go into Kuzami's history, in the 8 years that Barack Obama was president, there were a lot of very suspicious settlements, you know, where the government would go after this bank or this organization and they would exact a settlement. And in many cases, the settlements had a provision in them where you had to, the bank or whatever, had to send a lot of money to non-for-profits that are not that well controlled.
What?
Yeah, and this is something we're going to work on in coming weeks and months. But yeah, and a lot of these, the settlement money would then bleed out into the, you know, ecosystem of these progressive and left-leaning, supposedly progressive and left-leaning groups, knowing full well that Lois Lerner was early on in charge of that IRS department that would decide what to do, and that the whole system would be game. So, you know, I think this whole this decision to go after Michael Cohen in this way is repugnant. And,
yeah.
And people like Dershowitz, you know, who's a constitutional scholar, left-leaning, you know, was outraged by it. He can't get him off the television set now.
Yeah.
He's probably living in Hannity's house at this point. But he makes excellent points, Dershowitz.
But you know, Charles, in addition to you yourself being a legend, you're giving us the legend right here. It's these NGOs, these 501c3s that are, obviously the regulations are not very tightly enforced. So it seems that we're aware of a number of people who just create these 501c3s and they become slush funds that are not taxed. I mean, is it possible that because it's not taxed, the IRS is looking at it less than it would a regular corporation?
Well, the sad case is that you know, fraudsters, they know how to fraud, right? And you're talking about a business that involves a whole bunch of people who are willing to give away their money, right? You know, so that's, you know, that's a sort of an attractive place to go if you're a fraudster, right?
Right.
These are people who are prepared to give their money away. Okay, well, so they won't miss it.
Don't actually have to give them anything in return.
Right, you see, and they won't miss it when it's gone.
Right.
Is the theory.
The tax write-off.
And when you go and you meet, as I'm sure you have, and I certainly have met many people in the established charity world. They are belt and suspenders people. They think they're very cautious and they're very earnest, and they have all kinds of processes and procedures and manuals. And I remember going to I had a small hand in helping to start the Columbia County Land Conservancy, and I was asked to go to a cocktail party in New York, to discuss what they were going to do next. And there was this really snobby guy who was probably my age, when I was like in my 20s then or early 30s, and this guy was maybe in his 70s, and in a very stilted accent, he said, "You mean the executive director expects to have a salary? Why doesn't he just do this for free?" Because not everybody is a billionaire,
Wow.
But anyway, that world is a funny world, and there are people who in that world who think they're very smart, Bill Gates included, who actually are very stupid. And they don't understand that they're distorting these poor countries by letting these overpaid, unregulated people in the Gates Foundation and elsewhere. There's a great book about this. Fly around, get installed in expatriate compounds in these poor countries, living the high life. In the not-for-profit land, nobody regulates the money. It's tough to regulate these monies because you let's say you give it in dollars, but you spend it in Thai baht, and Thai baht are doing this, and it matters a lot whether you change your dollars when Thai baht are here or you change them when they're here. And if you're crooked about accounting for all that, you can skive tremendous amounts of money out, let alone coming up with something like the Clinton Foundation where it's crooked by design.
Right.
No real accountant, no real lawyers, all kinds of political grifters who are looking at this as a perfect con to raise money and spend money to advance political campaigns.
Oh, I just thought of a great title for a future episode, The Wrath of Khan.
There you go. See what I like that. That's good. You're always thinking, Jason. That's
Always
one of the things I like about you.
Always think.
So then we have this person. Now, Madeleine Albright
Not so bright.
is definitely not that smart. I like the story. It's because you got to laugh at yourself. I love the story about I think it was the Dayton Peace Accords, where they had some set of miserable participants in that accord were in, I think, Versailles, the palace in France somewhere, and they were yabbering away in whatever languages they were speaking in, and the door opens and woman comes in, and one participant looks at the other and was like, "What are you doing here?" And says, "You can come clean up later." And that woman was Madeleine Albright. That was not a smart move. But I mean, this is not the most discerning individual in the world. And Madeleine Albright was the one, Bill Clinton with his song and dance BS story about he didn't do anything. He had the cabinet meeting after the Lewinsky revelations. The person who went to the microphone, I believe, to defend Bill Clinton was Madeleine Not So Bright. I mean, she didn't figure out what was going on there and she's not somebody I would rely upon to spot a real dictator around the world. So to these kind of ridiculous quotes about Trump are really, just because you went to Wellesley, just because you've been in the elite, just because you were Secretary of State, doesn't give you the right to look down your nose at somebody who is actually doing level best, working for free, I might add, to try to repair the immense damage that globalists have done to everybody in America, except for the chosen few who are in on the crooked deals. So this was not one of the most intelligent comments that she made here.
Right. So what was the comment exactly?
I
think Trump is the most
he's the most undemocratic president I've ever seen in American history. He's, basically we're on the road to a fascist state run by Donald Trump. Unlike what happened under Obama, when
he's just jailing journalists who he doesn't like,
spying on the Supreme Court, spying on the Senate, spying on the House, making a mockery of the law. The law doesn't matter.
I think I read some article about Madeleine Albright watching The Wizard of Oz with Kim Jong-il.
I think you're right. I think she did do that.
Yeah. Well, that's diplomacy, though. I kind of liked it that she did that.
Yeah, I
didn't do anything, but
yeah, I never liked that movie.
Wizard of Oz?
No, I didn't. So let's just see. I wrote, let's see, I think, is that?
It's weird. There we go.
Yeah.
More American.
Oh yeah, this is not the one I wrote. This is a great writer. I don't know. I'll slaughter his name. I don't know if it's Sobieski or, but he writes for the American Thinker, and Thomas Lifson, I think, is the editor of the American Thinker. I've written a few pieces now for him. But you contrast what happened with Manafort, what happened now with Michael Cohen, with what didn't happen to the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
I mean, the people that I spoke to in the very beginning, the experts I spoke to in the very beginning said, look, it's a very simple thing. The Attorney General of Arkansas shows up unannounced, people from the office show up unannounced and say, give us all your records.
Why are they not doing that?
I think because this scandal so incriminates so many people across the political spectrum inside Arkansas. I think it incriminates, the Walmart family, the Walton family have given substantial money to these frauds. The University of Arkansas and its foundation that supports the University of Arkansas have given substantial money to these frauds.
And so?
So you expose it and there's substantial penalties, substantial egg on face, lots of people have to go to jail in both parties.
Yeah, but they're just letting them get away with crimes. Someone, I forget who, said to me that it is like just an incredibly metastasized, inoperable cancer, that if you removed it, the body would fail. And that the swamp is so entrenched that if you drain the swamp, there'd be nothing left.
Yeah, I beg to differ on that one. I mean, I think with regard to Arkansas, there are Arkansas has turned, I believe it is primarily now Republican, and there's no good reason at this point for saying, look, this has been a fraud all along. If we think about what actually happened, a bunch of suckers wrote checks thinking that they get off scot-free and buy influence with the Clintons, and that they buy a dynasty, that they give them $10 million, and for the rest of their kids' lives they'd be able to get something out of the Clintons, Chelsea, and who knows who comes next, Charlotte and whatever the other kid's name is after Chelsea. So that didn't happen. And what in fact did happen is the records of the people of the United States of America that were created during Bill's tenure as president are now in a facility built by these suckers. So if you retroactively revoke the charity, the tax status of the charity, you're going to be able to collect a lot of money from people who've been playing crooked games for over 20 years. And that's a good thing if you're trying to narrow the budget. And as far as Arkansas is concerned, yeah, it'll be embarrassing. But is the building going to come tumbling down? No. Are the records going to disappear? No. Is there going to now be even more interest in understanding what all happened in Clinton land? I think you're going to get more tourism to Little Rock, not less.
Well, they could really expand the mini golf course and restaurant part of the presidential life.
Exactly.
It'd be a tourist attraction.
Exactly. And so if Branson, Missouri can be a big place for country western, well, you should be able to do something more than simply go to the Clinton Presidential Center.
The road-killed barbecue.
The road-killed barbecue, hot sauce manufacturing factory, or whatever.
Oh, someone sent me some more art. I got to try to find that.
Or the Hillary Clinton, eyeglass collection. So if we look here, this conservative treehouse, I don't know who you are, but you do great work, particularly the person who writes under Sundance. We shouldn't be in a position now where, people are laying down, have to lay down ultimatums to get the Trump Justice Department to do its job. I mean,
who gave an ultimatum?
Nunes gave a 24-hour ultimatum to get certain information produced. We'll see if it comes.
Or what?
Or these people are going to be impeached by the House. Now,
where does it say that?
This is, I don't know, this is, I think, I don't know why that comes up, because I had a different link than that one.
Sometimes let's see.
That's very strange. I had a link to a more recent thing about.
Is that it?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. And here it's important to understand, our good friend Sidney Powell, we featured her book I think last time, she has written a great book, License to Lie, in which she explains that Chris Wray is not necessarily an angel.
Yeah. Slow-footed Enron, we've heard.
Right. So there's.
What else did she say?
Well, I haven't spoken to her recently, but I don't think we should be now in April 11th, 2018, almost a year and a half into the Trump presidency. We're past a place where we should be able to say, well, Trump doesn't really have his fingers in control of his own Justice Department. I mean, that's crazy stuff. And we've got to, it's clear that there is a gigantic rot problem in the Justice Department and in the IRS and in the State Department, and who knows where else. And the rot needs to come out. We're paying for the rot. Taxpayers are paying for it. Our children and grandchildren are going to pay for it. It's got to stop. And with that, I think we could go to the next page.
And you're not talking about Roger O. Thornhill either.
Who is that?
Oh, that's one of the best movies ever. North by Northwest.
Oh, North by, yeah.
Cary Grant was Roger Thornhill. I'm not Kaplan.
So this is an interesting thing. We talk about this a fair bit, that these intolerant elites, I think, are just trying to strangle debate. But here's this Raoul Felder is not a right-wing kook. He's a left-leaning person. And here he's making, trenchant point here that the Cohen raid is like the McCarthyism or the Salem witch trials. I mean, when Raoul Felder says something like this isn't, Sean Hannity, and I like Sean Hannity. This is somebody on the left saying, yeah, this is not good. It's taken him a little while to get the story out. It came out at 2:55 p.m. yesterday.
And the raid was on Sunday, or when was the raid?
I'm not sure when the raid was, actually.
I think I heard about it over the weekend or on Monday.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he's right. It is appalling. I mean, we sit around talking about how we've lost all these rights, but I mean, look at this. They can come into your house, take your stuff, violate one of the strongest, that attorney-client privilege is supposed to, a guy could tell his attorney that he killed somebody and the attorney's not allowed to be questioned about it, right?
No, I don't think that's right. I think if you confess to a crime, it's a different story. But if you, but I'm not a lawyer, so I shouldn't answer the question.
But I mean, the point is, the lawyer jealously protects the information shared with the client, and for them to just come to, particularly they're after this contract where he paid the porn star $100 grand.
Right, and they're now saying, there's a story just out there, now saying they're also interested in, who paid for the, who may have shut down inquiry into the Hollywood Access tape. They're going into...
Shut down what?
Remember there was the Trump, what Trump said that...
To Billy Bush at Access Hollywood? What did they shut down about it? It came out on TV?
Well, they're trying to investigate whether monies were paid to tamp down the inquiry into that incident at the time. But the point here is that... when we look at this, when we look at the contrast between, how Hillary Clinton was treated with kid gloves, right? There was an investigation into her emails that started July 10th, 2015. It was a full square investigation. It wasn't a matter. It wasn't a low, it was a gigantic investigation. There were rumors that there were 150 FBI agents on the case.
And all their stuff was thrown out by Peter Strzok.
and exactly. And he was one of them sitting on top of that investigation.
Yeah.
Then when it looked like, Donald Trump was gaining some traction, they said, we got to stop him. The contrast in between the way in which the FBI and the DOJ and the Obama administration supported Hillary, Barack Obama in the middle of the investigation saying, I don't really think that she did anything intentional here. Remember he said that? I mean, why isn't that obstruction of justice, right? Now, if Trump criticizes somebody, my goodness, I mean, you should be impeached for that. But Obama can say, it's nothing here.
Well, but also they're saying that this 100 and whatever thousand that Michael Cohen paid was an illegal campaign contribution.
Right.
I mean, again, I keep coming back to everything these guys are doing is mirrored by the same ridiculous stuff that the opponents of Crowdsource the Truth do. And it's not to say that I'm remotely analogous to President Trump, but rather these idiots are using the same playbook as the idiots that are playing games with us.
Well, but yeah, I'd say that you really they shouldn't really want to go here and make this argument because it's a very dangerous argument for them. We're talking about $130,000. I don't think Hillary Clinton made, prior to her most recent debacle, $25,000 speech.
Less than
like 200, less than Snooki. I don't think she made many speeches for only 130,000. And she
Right.
made many, many speeches.
For well over.
Well over. In some cases, it's probably the same speech, you know, in a matter of days or on the same day, mostly to people who are very interested in seeing her win the presidency, very interested in having it chit in. Why weren't all of those speech payments
Illegal campaign contributions.
right, that were
Very
never
good
disclosed
point,
properly?
Charles.
What about Bill Clinton's $17.6 million from Laureate? What about all this missing charitable funding? What
Why
about
isn't she 50 points ahead?
yeah, well, exactly. I paid for that.
So I think I hear what you're saying.
I mean, it's a day. I think this is not. This is a desperation move to go down this trail. You go here because you don't have the facts on your side. You don't have the law on your side. You're trying to manipulate public opinion on your side, and you think what you're going to do, as a guess, is whip things up during the summer when the students who won't have any summer jobs and when the recent graduates who are going to be fired from their jobs will be very happy to make $100 a day, you know, burning things and throwing things and yelling
Tifa.
things, you know. Exactly. That's why you do something like this, not because it's smart, not because it has a prayer of winning, and certainly not because it sets any kind of precedent you want to be proud of. So this is very dangerous stuff. And I hope cooler heads are going to prevail very quickly here. If we
So do I get what you're saying? Snooki 2020?
Snooki, no, no Snooki in 2020 or ever. Now, this is an interesting, the bullion vault. I don't know if that's the one you hit. Oops, it's all right. Yeah. Huh. So strange.
No. You know what? Because when it becomes a PDF, sometimes strange things happen.
All
Let's
right. Well,
try
we
it
can
from
go to
here.
the other one. I can cover it.
That's weird. That's from the Microsoft one.
I can cover it. Yeah, just with this one. So basically, you know, we've been over this a little bit before, but it's worth thinking about it. You know, when you go and you want to buy a new screen or a new computer or a new whatever, you think about it. Most people think about it. They say, you know, there's a lot of competition, and you know, let's see the best deal I can get. You know, at whatever price point I'm prepared to think about spending. People agonize about that. The business model for social media is, let's not tell Jason Goodman and Charles Ortel how valuable your personal information is. And instead of paying you for it, let's just steal it. All right? And then we'll give you some like little, you know, crappy little t-shirt over here, this email service, which anybody can get, you know, or maybe, you know, a little bit up.
But
from
they don't
that.
actually give you a T-shirt. They just give you the experience of using their social media network.
Right. They give you the experience of sharing with all your friends immensely valuable data to advertisers for which you're not
Right.
compensated.
Right.
And destroying your personal privacy. That's what they give you.
Right.
And then they take back being the richest person in the world off
Right.
this stunt.
Right.
You know, so there's something, if you're going to say that, and I happen to be somebody who's very much against payday lending. I don't know if
Like
payday lending is where they prey particularly on the military, people who just have no money, and they get themselves in a bind, and a payday lender comes along and says,
retail loans.
well, it's far worse than retail. They go to you and they say, Jason, if you want $100 right now, I'll give you $100. The problem is you got to give me $250 next week.
Whoa.
You know, it's a very high interest rates. I'm exaggerating to make the point, but way over 18% and 20 or
Why is that legal?
it shouldn't be legal. But this is akin to payday lending. You're going to people. A lot of people got hooked on Facebook below the age of 18. You're either dealing with young people or older people like me who are not that versed with technology, who didn't really think it through properly in the beginning and said, yeah, it's free. You know,
Right.
what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
And then you realize the tools that these social media companies have with the metadata and by other means to, when thinking through large samples of people, they begin to be able to predict behavior.
Yes.
And that is, you know, that's scary. That's Big Brother kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if the data is not protected, which Zuckerberg admitted, you know, it's not a great move, I think, to go up and say, you know, they didn't kill 87 million people, but let's just say it's similar. You know, I just killed 87 million people. It's my responsibility. I promise it won't happen again. Don't I look good in a suit?
He doesn't look that good.
I know.
You look nervous.
That's why I said. But anyway, so I think what we see is that the business model, that was from the preceding point, the business model from social media doesn't really for my mind, work. I think you should have businesses have customers, real customers who should knowingly buy products and services. They should have form of view as, do I want to part with this money to get this thing? They shouldn't be induced into it. They shouldn't be financed into it. And if you're going to become the richest person in the world by monetizing groups of data, we ought to understand that trade a little bit better. Particularly if you got into it allegedly by stealing the idea from the Winklevoss brothers, as is alleged.
But is it actually illegal or just crappy?
Well, again, if we believe that all humans are imperfect, and some humans are a lot more imperfect than others, and there are always going to be criminals, and there's a fraud, the mind of a fraudster. You're born a fraudster. You're not going to be anything other than a fraudster. As that case, that famous fraudster, the reformed fraudster went to prison. That guy, the Z.
Catch Me If You Can.
Not him. Then there was another guy who was like a retailing fraudster, and then he went to prison, did his time, and then he gave speeches. He got paid not $150,000 a speech, but he gave speeches, and promptly got back into the fraud business. I mean, there's some people are they're fraudsters. You're not going to change them, And
I think I know some of those people.
I believe you do. Sadly.
They're suing me.
Exactly. So we know them as well. The Clintons, they're fraudsters.
Yeah.
So I think that the government has a proper role trying to decide, is this a con or a business?
Right.
And that really is, and particularly, and frankly, it should be, is this a con or a charity? Right? I think you'll see when you look at across the spread, which I have more familiarity doing, there are very few businesses that generate reliably large amounts of money, even 15 cents after tax for each dollar of revenue. It's not so easy to do that in a big business these days because there's so much competition. But if you imagine a world where the controls are gamed, and you can set yourself up to just have incoming flows of money that come towards the charity but don't ever hit the books. The numbers, as we learned recently from a charity rating agency, those charity rating agencies don't have the time or the ability to really check this stuff. So it's possible, and I think we see it in the Clinton case and related cases, that you could make tremendous amounts of completely untaxed money by running a crooked charity scam, as the Clintons have done, in my view.
I think it's a loophole that a lot of people have tacked on to.
Yeah, and so this Boston Herald piece is interesting.
Well, that's the one we were just looking at.
No, the one we couldn't do is Bullion Vault. It was a Boston Herald. I'm sorry, you're right. The next one then. You can go on. The Boston Herald is more about the fact that social media is definitely not all that tolerant of conservative and opposing views. Now, this story I only saw recently, just turns my stomach. The note,
Hillary Rodham Clinton Fund for the Public Interest at your alma mater.
I didn't go to Yale Law School.
Oh, sorry.
But
Yale.
this is just. I mean, Yale Law School is to the left of I don't know what. It's notoriously been left-leaning for a long time. But the notion that Yale, which has a gigantic endowment and which so foolishly has supported the Clinton Foundation, and we're going to be doing pieces on this, though it cuts a little bit into my background and embarrasses the institution I do like.
I don't like the Skull and Bones, though.
There's no. I wasn't in Skull and Bones.
Not you, but Yale. Skull and Bones is part of Yale, isn't it? It's a club.
It's technically
at Yale.
a club in New Haven, affiliated with Yale, but it's definitely not controlled by Yale University.
But it's Yale students that are in it.
Right, and alumni. But anyways, just staying narrowly on the issue. It's okay of Yale Law School deciding that it would make sense to support this record, as if the Clintons have done anything that's in the public interest. You could rename the fund. What is it? The Hillary R. Clinton School or Fund for the Clinton Family Interest. It would be a better thing. What has she actually done that's in the public interest? And we won't play around with eliminating a letter there to talk about Bill. But anyway, if we go to the next one.
Laser hair removal for underprivileged models.
Right.
What is this an ad for?
I don't want to know. Anyway, if we go back into the slides.
A little loopy today.
That's okay. Then we think a little bit here about this Ben Sass. I don't particularly like Ben Sass, but he it kind of rhymes with itch slapped Mark Zuckerberg around a little bit. Trying to get this idea of what is hate speech.
Oh, I saw that segment.
And we have to be very, very careful there. I mean, it's easy for people to get offended, and often, great ideas will offend people. And letting this Mark Zuckerberg decide, that he's going to employ a whole bunch of people who also like to go around on skateboards or whatever they do with their, T-shirts or whatever. These are the geniuses, with little life experience who are now going to curate the news for us. Now, I'm not so sure I like that.
I don't like it either, but what I will say is, having a rating system or something on like movies or rated R, you can say stuff in Goodfellas that you're not going to say in a Disney movie or whatever. So, I mean, hate speech could be defined. Like if you say X, that's not allowed. They could put words that they might not allow you to put posts.
Yeah, so let's take a recent interesting case. That, in the Islamic world, the Shia and the Sunni really don't like each other.
Yeah.
And here we have MBS, the rising crown prince in Saudi Arabia, soon to be king, basically calling the leadership in Iran, accusing them of being Hitler. Is that hate speech? I mean,
well,
I think
no.
Well, I could see how, if you criticize, if you have, let's say Zuckerberg's firm were controlled by big, wealthy, let's say, Sunni as opposed to Shia, you could see people, I don't know, tamping down debate here in ways which I'm not sure is at all sensible, particularly as we look at, you started off talking about Google and the video dissemination of news, which I think is, where a lot of it's coming, and an increasing share from alternative media. That's disrupting and displacing the traditional print media. You start having, in effect, censors. You decide, "Nah, I'm taking this down for an anonymous strike, whatever." I like your idea though of ratings, not ratings, but like voting. The people vote. They watch it and they say,
Well, they have that on certain social media. What I was getting at was if Facebook said, hey, we're a family-friendly environment for people to interact and debate, but you're not allowed to use the F word or something like that. If they defined what it is that they don't want you saying here, people could decide if they want to debate within that context or not. That's what I was getting at. If they want to say Facebook is rated PG, and if you say anything from this list of words or whatever, and then they have to publish the list of words they don't want you to say. I mean, I don't know. I'm not prepared to say. The biggest problem I have with what's going on YouTube with us is that it's not like they've sent me some list of 27 rules and I violated rule 18 and don't do that again. They just say, oh, you got a community guideline strike from somebody we don't know who for something that we don't know what, and how can I now prevent myself from doing that again without knowing what it was?
And the potential for abuse is mammoth. And I mentioned I monitor just to see, if people are publishing or saying something about me that I want to correct. I several times a day I checked, in quotes, punch in my name and see what pops up. Mm-hmm. And I was following a trend of getting more and more hits and more hits, and then till the last week or so, in the morning when I did it, it was 29,000 came up, and
as opposed to the usual
276,000 when I came over just now.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't make sense that there would be that much of a change.
Right.
And it makes me wonder: is Google trying to suppress, the number of stories that would come up if you punched up Charles Ortel to restrict the wider audience from seeing, who may be interested in what we're doing and what else have I said and what else do I care about?
Right.
So I think actually, sunlight is the best disinfectant. If somebody wants to say something that's completely stupid, let them say it, and let the crowd and the people react.
The problem becomes, though, Charles, is that people game those systems and rig those systems, and if one individual or a small group of individuals were able to put together some sort of malicious software that pushed out some fake story saying you did something horrible or you were a criminal or whatever, with the specific intent of damaging your reputation. That is different than one person coming forward and saying, I'm,
Right.
Jason Howerton, and here's what I say about Charles Ortel. Because then you could contact Jason Howerton and say, that's wrong, or that's your opinion,
Right.
or whatever. But what we have is this insidious operation throughout the internet where people are using technology that in some cases people aren't even aware of. We've heard of bots, AI bots.
Right.
They want you to think they're Russian bots. According to Alex Jones, very small percentage of all the bots are from Russia. I don't know how he knows that, but the point is people can manipulate these things. And when we don't know what the rules are, when we don't know what the infraction is, and we don't know what the accuser is, how can we defend? How can we prevent? It's just stupid.
Right, and we go back and remember a little bit of recent history. We're talking about a team that was running this country that was quite prepared to use alias emails.
Right.
Right?
That's their favorite thing to do, to hide behind fake emails. And then they say, well, that wasn't me. That was,
right.
That was, what was the email that Chelsea Clinton, was it Donna Summer or something like that?
Well, it was Richard Windsor was, I think, Lisa Jackson, and then there was her fake name, and what was Chelsea's? I forget. But you just shouldn't be able, as a government official, you should have to use your real name and a government email, and you should preserve all that. Otherwise, Freedom of Information Act makes no sense. Right. On these platforms, if you want to comment anonymously, you shouldn't be allowed to strike.
Well, anonymously, yes.
Right.
I personally don't even think that people should be able to comment anonymously. I think if you want to enjoy a social media platform like YouTube anonymously, you should be allowed to just watch it. And if you want to create content, either in the form of video or comments, we should have a right to know who those people are.
Exactly.
And if people don't like that, they should go to some other platform and do it there. But if YouTube wants to be the biggest platform in the world for this type of thing, and if everything that Alex Jones and the people at the InfoWars press conference were saying yesterday was correct, I want to find out more about that, how it is that YouTube has benefited from being this public utility. And if they are, like, you can't sign up as Snidely Whiplash and get your electric bill. I mean, you've got to be Charles Ortel, and you can't do that. You can't do that.
You shouldn't do that. Yeah. So we talked, I think, already about these 2 points. If we go to this one here, this was the article I was alluding to on Sunday. This went out.
Oh yes.
And it's getting a fair amount of attention. A lot of work went into this. Thomas Lifson did some great editing and helping us go through this. But in essence, what this article walks you through, providing links to the underlying source evidence, and there's going to be more coming on this, is that the core portion of Media Matters, that is supposed to be an educational charity, like the Clinton Foundation, has never done its paperwork properly, is using an unregistered and therefore illegal fundraiser, is overcompensating that unregistered and illegal fundraiser, and is coordinating activities with an action organization that has never been organized properly. So all of this is the bully of choice. This is the group that went after Laura Ingraham.
Yep.
This is the group that's gone after many, many people.
Cheryl Atkinson.
These are bullies and cheats.
Yeah. And
they need to be exposed and they need to be punished.
They need to go to jail, really. David Brock needs to spend a little bit of time in jail.
Right. Well, I don't know about a little bit. I think
maybe a lot.
I mean, if Corinne Brown's there for 5 years, I mean, I think when you look at all the pieces, as the people in the IRS could do, they could look at, there are multiple charities here. He's getting paid multiple ways. He's involved multiple ways with his fundraiser. He's overcompensating his fundraiser enormously. He's not disclosing these defects in all the states where he operates and solicits. And he's leading, I'm told, a very high lifestyle, like the Clintons.
Oh, you see people he's hanging out at parties with Linda Rothschild.
Right, well, exactly. So, I mean, I think this whole world is important for the integrity of this country, that the world of charities be regulated properly. If you want to do what we're doing, as just using our own money and not taking a charitable deduction for it, we can do that, bear the consequences. Yeah. But if you want to get the valuable right to solicit donations to support a cause and give your donors tax deductions and not pay taxes on your own, on the profits generated by this organization, accumulate those excesses tax-free and compound, et cetera, You got to follow the rules. And David Brock has not been following the rules. What is this you're doing?
Well, this is, I think this is his name Andrew Kerr, the guy that does the guy who does the citizens audit. I remember I saw him on YouTube maybe over a year ago, and he had done some really excellent work with regard to media matters and how they were subletting office space illegally to other entities and making money from that and not declaring it. And
right.
so this would be an interesting website. This is citizenoaudit.org, so people can check that out and learn about what a lowlife David Brock is. And a lot of these activities that we see happening to try to thwart the progress of Crowdsource the Truth seem very similar in principle to things that are done by Media Matters, to the extent that it makes me wonder if Media Matters might not have an offshoot or some former employees who, guys who worked
right.
at 21st Century 3D went on to do other 3D ventures. So if you've got experience working for Media Matters, perhaps you start your own little internet troll program.
Right, exactly. And this, for journalists don't make a lot of money. So, you give a journalist who's, let's say, writing other things, an extra $25,000 a year, $40,000 a year, or $50,000, or even $100,000 a year. That's a lot of money to a journalist. And so this Media Matters and the Media Matters Action Network and all the affiliates, we're going to be diving into that in great detail. Tax deadlines are upon us. They face new tax deadlines. They have not reported properly. They have never been audited properly. They're not being honest about the state of their legal affairs. And they have big money donors like George Soros behind them, who,
right.
If you roll up the Soros Foundation, he'll squeal like the pig that he is.
Yeah. And I always like to remind people that George Soros is not a Nazi. He just worked for them.
So if we go back in there, let's see. Yeah, you already put up this McCabe thing.
Yeah.
But we can bring it up again just for the hell of it.
Yeah, I always love trolling Andrew McCabe. He's a pretty terrible guy. He was really bad to Robin Gritz and seems to have been covering for the Clintons for many, many years. Great reporting here from True Pundit. And we're still, jury's still out on this Michael Horowitz. Harmon Wilfred has presented a lot of really not so favorable information about him, but yet here we see him bringing forward information that seems to put him on the right side of doing the right thing.
Well, this I think is an important piece because I've long felt, given my experience in banking, that the New York offices of the investigative organizations are likely to be the most potentially corrupt offices.
Why
right?
is that?
That's where the money flows. New York is the money capital. And if you put yourself in the mind of a criminal and you say, okay, if I'm going to be investigated, who's going to be investigating a money fraud? It's going to be the FBI. Why don't I get somebody dirty in a senior role in the FBI in New York?
Yeah.
And these frauds, the financial ones we're dealing with, whether the GE, the General Motors, AIG, and now the Clinton Foundation, these are very complicated frauds that operate all around the world. It's tough to get your mind wrapped around it. If you can game the system by having Lois Lerner in the IRS, making sure that she'll make sure that there's no IRS charity fraud matters or problems for you, and then you got somebody, I'm not saying it's McCabe, but somebody like McCabe in the New York FBI field office, you're going to have a major league leg up as against the people, many, they're crooked Republicans too, but many Republicans, oh yes, there's a conflict of interest, I better recuse myself, and oh yes, I should probably give myself a timeout for this minor infraction. I mean, if you've got, on the one hand, people who are prepared to go break as many laws as the Clintons have broken with impunity for so many years, chances are they're going to try to have their allies in key FBI offices and certainly in the IRS and in justice. And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, these crimes are very sophisticated, Charles. The people that are executing them are adept at covering their tracks. They know the law. They know how to avoid prosecution. And again, I see that as another analog to what's going on to crowdsource the truth here, because it's sophisticated operations that are, I've referred to it as a distributed defamation campaign where it's not one individual doing all of it, it's spread out among
Sure.
a bunch of individuals so that no one person is doing anything so bad that the police or the FBI would necessarily go after that one person. And this is the way these people think, distributed networks, you know,
Sure.
with cryptocurrency and everything, it all relies on these peer-to-peer type of things. And so they've sort of emulated that in their cowardly attacks.
But there is some good news. And the
What
good
is
news is we're racing now toward these tax filing deadlines. Remember that we talked about this before, that if you're a charity and you have an adverse development like a criminal investigation in a state or a foreign country or maybe many, you got to kind of disclose that. And you certainly have to tell your accountants about it. The charity regulators care about it. The donating public cares about it. And more states and foreign governments are watching this closely, very closely. And this topic, which started out, when I started on this 3 years ago, you know, not many people were talking about potential major financial problems. They were talking, they didn't quite see what the Clintons were doing, but they didn't see this as a vast criminal conspiracy with evidence staring at you right in the public filings. They didn't see it that way. Now most people think of this as a fraud.
Yeah.
And I think the public is wondering, you know, what's taking so long? You know, why is nothing happening? And I'm hoping that we're finally going to see, when an earthquake happens, the tectonic plates shift suddenly and sharply.
Yes.
And that's what's going to happen here, I think.
I think you could be right. I hope you are.
So if we go to the next page, and the final page.
This is all about what should happen, Charles.
I don't know how I came up with that idea. We could do, if I may, let's hit that FBI vault file, like you were on it there for a second.
Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, and let's actually go into the PDF. And for the hell of it, let's just go to page 156.
Woo, 156 coming up.
What this is most recent filing from the FBI vault of stuff they were looking at in connection with the email investigation. And it's lots and lots and lots of, we took this device at this time and this and that and blah, 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 blah. But by page 156 or thereabouts, 156 or 158.
Why did it stop giving me the page numbers?
You have to put your cursor at the very top.
Ah.
103.
Charles, that's the first time you've ever told me something about computers.
I know, it's scary, huh?
It's pretty good.
All right, so we slow it, all right, about there, yeah. The beginning of this letter, beginning. Okay, it's dated 26 October 2015, okay? This is a letter to the Chief Division Counsel of the Drug Enforcement Agency from whom?
Peter Stroke.
Peter
Stroke,
Stroke, I think.
Stroke, whatever.
Okay, what does this say? In July 2015, the FBI received a Section 811 referral from the Inspector General for the Intelligence Community regarding the possible compromise of classified national security information. This is Peter Strzok sending a letter explaining this and saying, you know, we want this, we want that out of this division. Letter after letter after letter in this filing, going all the way through to 256 pages. So you'll see Peter Strzok's John Hancock, as it were, on the next page.
HRC 8447. Does that mean they have 8,446 other?
There's his, you know, John Hancock.
It's a very handsome signature.
Yeah, a lot of.
Looks like he could, you know, sign baseball cards or something like that.
I guess. But you'll see letter after letter after letter. There's another one coming up, I think, right there. 2nd of November. Okay? Letter after letter from Peter Strzok, personally contacting all of these different division heads, trying to, you know, round up and determine whether the emails that Hillary had provided reluctantly on December 5th, 2014, whether those emails were appropriately classified or not. And to say that this man, the very same man who's coming up with the insurance plan, right, he's the one, isn't he, with Lisa Page?
Texting the girlfriend.
Right. Well, I mean, how he had time to write these letters when he was doing all the texting, but this is a guy who's clearly centrally involved, supervising aspects of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's misuse of classified information in the run-up to the primary season, you know, when she was vulnerable. sending letter after letter after letter, and then once it was clear that she's across the line, then targeting Trump, same guy. You know, and this guy's supposed to be working in the FBI. He's supposed to be apolitical. And he's in a very high level. I don't think we know enough yet about this man. I don't think we know enough yet about this process, and it stinks to high heaven. And thank you to the FBI vault, whoever you are, for bringing this out. Keep the papers coming. 'Cause our team watches.
When was this released, Charles?
It was released, I think, Monday morning.
Whoa. So that's hot off the press.
Hot off the presses, yeah. I've already sent it around to people, but this is further confirmation that Hillary Clinton absolutely was, was absolutely under serious investigation the entire time at which she was swanning around the country to these fancy fundraisers, raising money for a primary campaign. If she, talk about regulations that should be in place for political candidates. If I gave money to Hillary Clinton, serious money, shame on me for even doing it, but if you did it in hindsight, and now you learn that she was actually under serious investigation, you don't feel too good about that 10,000, 25,000, 50, whatever it is, the check that you wrote, because you're an idiot.
Well, right. It's like buying a Mercedes that was in a huge accident and they didn't tell you.
That's right. You need candidatefacts.com.
Right.
Anyway, so here's another Matt Gaetz in the conservative treehouse here. Matt is a young congressperson from Florida who I think does excellent work. I appreciate the sacrifices he must be making as a young person to serve in Congress instead of building his career. What's that? There you go. Okay, if we look, he's saying the Department of Justice certainly appears to me to be covering up these FISA abuses. We talk about swearing out a warrant to go do a no-knock raid against Michael Cohen. What happened, during the campaign period and afterwards, in 2016, early 17, until President Obama left office, seems to me to be a gross abuse of the system of obtaining these surveillance warrants against potentially American targets. And the Department of Justice does not want to admit just how deeply corrupt and embarrassing and
so sorry, Charles.
profoundly illegal, bless you, their activities may be. So they're slow walking this thing. I mean, come on, guys. The Department of Justice cannot play by one set of rules when it's implicated and then use incredibly aggressive tactics against we the people who pay their bills, when they, it looks like they might be embarrassed yet again. They can't do it. They can't have it both ways. And, ordinary people, not even college graduates, high school graduates, good, decent working people in this country, they look at this, they see a rat, they smell a rat, they see a rat in all this slow walking. It's got to stop. And fess up and admit the truth. And Mr. Sessions, if you're not prepared to do your job, pick another job. Do us all a favor. Go run against Doug Jones in Alabama. Maybe you'd win that seat. But you're not doing a good job here as Attorney General.
Is he doing anything?
I don't know what he's doing. I really don't know. Maybe in real life he's a decent person, but sometimes, you get into a role and you're just not cut out for it. And that's, I'm never going to be an opera singer. I'm not even going to try. Right? So, and Devin Nunes here, this Hill story.
Or Teliachi.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
How's John Solomon doing?
I haven't heard from him recently, actually. I haven't seen any stories.
I think he's busy.
Yeah, but here Devin Nunes is talking about impeaching Christopher Wray and Rosenstein. And it shouldn't have to come to this.
But it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea. It's past its time. And by the way, I did check. You can impeach somebody who has left office.
What is that going to do, though?
Just to stain on their record. So... Anyway, this is a piece well worth reading. I just think we need to try to give whatever support we can to Devin Nunes. He's doing yeoman's duty. I think he's a decent human being.
Robin just met with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think he's helping her. And I guess he's watching at least some of what we do.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Keep up the great work.
Yeah.
So now we have this interesting story here at the Moscow Times. Let's see if this comes up. When we think about the relationship between the United States and Russia, if you count Russia's ancient history, it's a much older nation than the United States of America, if you forgive the little detour of the Soviet Union period. That said, the Russian population is less than half the size of the American population. The economy is not at all, it's not diversified at all, basically. It's heavily dependent on the energy sector. It's not going to win a fight financially or militarily against the US. So we're in a suboptimal place here where, for whatever reason, it has suited the deep state to keep the tensions high with Russia. Whereas if we think about the great promises that China has made to Russia, I'm told, just reading in the press, that China has yet to fund many of these big infrastructure plans, a big target, exactly.
That's very Chinese
from my
experience.
Yeah, why do we'll give you a whole bunch of energy eventually. We'll buy that energy. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Anyway, so in terms of the things you could change very quickly, if there were an appropriate back channel with Vladimir Putin's Russia, you'd say, actually now, we don't like this pain. We're a lot smaller, we appreciate, but we're a proud nation, and we'd like to work with you, we'd like to cooperate with you, but we're not going to be humiliated, and we're not going to be put under the thumb of an administration that could change in 2 years and be something radically different. So if we're going to do something big and bold economically, let it last, and let it have as a piece of it the possibility that Russia and the United States could actually become military allies as opposed to military enemies.
And wouldn't that make so much sense?
It would make tremendous sense, especially when you consider we don't have a border with China. Russia does, a long border with China, and Russia has 1/8 the population of China. There are a lot of poor Chinese people. There's a lot of empty Russian territory. There's a lot of minerals there. You could imagine a moment in the future where some bunch of crazy generals in China would say,
Let's take over.
Yeah, I mean, they have enough land. We'll just take that bit. So I would have thought, you really think creatively about this. It would not be a process of weeks, months, or even scant years. It would take decades to really build close ties. But after all, we're quite friendly with Germany. We're quite friendly with Japan. Something about our history we have it in us to, we go through immense pain, fight very bloody battles, and at the end of the day, we learn from those mistakes and we move on. Why isn't it time to change radically the course of our relationship with Russia and work with Russia to expand their market, build out their infrastructure, build out their consumption base? They have wickedly smart people in Russia, still there, who can teach us a lot about technology. We can work better on certain, and we wouldn't go from the present state of chaos into an immediate love affair. That's not the way it's going to work. But there ought to be a way to shift this around and remove this pain, the financial pain, create economic opportunity for the Russians, not for the oligarchs, but for the Russian people, and then also work together in the Middle East and other theaters. I mean, you wake up and you say, okay, my team is England, France, Germany, Japan, Korea, and your team is Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. I mean, it just would seem to me that you're not on the right team if you've got to hang out with those dudes. So if we go to the next, we've got Tucker Carlson, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, and I have enormous regard for Tucker, has been the leader in recent days of saying, hang on, in Syria, what is America's real national interest in jumping back into Syria, and where is the evidence? Where is the real evidence that that this was perpetrated by Assad, by Russia, by Iran? Show me that evidence. And the reaction to Tucker's comments, I mean, good on Tucker for having a big spine and a stiff spine and standing up to it. The bullies is, you just need to shut up. You don't understand. But even people like Sebastian Gorka, who I do like, has been sort of very condescending and withering in his criticism of people who would say, it isn't absolutely the right thing to go in and punish Russia and punish Assad. You know, having watched the Middle East I'm older than Sebastian, that doesn't mean I'm wiser, but having watched it for a while, you look at the record 79 to the present, even if you want to go back a little bit further, how many times does America intervene and create a power vacuum for a worse person to come in and fill that vacuum? How many times have we done that, and will we ever learn?
Yeah.
You know, and here, you know, we instantly know that it's Russia behind this, it's Assad behind this. When we're talking about an incident in territory controlled by rebel groups who have a lot to lose if peace materializes, and you know, if we decide to broker a deal with Assad, they have a lot to lose. So I would not be so quick to assume that this is the right thing to do. I hope cooler heads will prevail, but you know, we're very close.
Yeah, they got all kinds of warships heading over there. Some of the points that were brought up in that segment I was talking about earlier with Syrian Girl and Paul Joseph Watson, there's no investigation. They just decided, you know,
here's the answer.
Did it? Yeah.
Take the guns away.
Ridiculous.
That's the right thing.
Ridiculous.
Now, yeah, that one. This Sarah Sanders, I think, is a wonderful human being. You know, it's not easy being a political brat, and her father, of course, was, you know, is still very active in politics. Thought about running for president and didn't do so well in the primaries in 2016. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders is really doing, I think, a wonderful. Forget about her gender. Forget about where she's from. She's just incredibly good at facing down.
Yeah, she's tough. I like that.
Yeah, really good, and you know, just incredibly effective.
Yep. Way better than Sean Spicer.
Well, Sean Spicer, yeah.
He was funny, but not.
He got off on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
But no, Sarah Sanders is very good, and she's absolutely right. If Donald Trump wants to take the political heat, he can cause Mueller to be fired. I think the better way to do it is I think Mueller should be under criminal investigation.
Yeah.
You know, and that sort of forces him to resign. Mueller, Rosenstein, maybe Wray.
And who would do that? Sessions? Who would bring that?
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the
Because
particulars.
that would be ideal.
Yeah.
You know, just show that they're. It's like, hey, Bob, what the hell happened to 9/11? Why don't you investigate that? You're investigating porn stars at Michael Cohen's house.
Right.
Who bombed the World Trade Center?
Why don't you get around to that one?
He's like, yeah.
So if we go back in. This was a great. Rush Limbaugh is away, and was obviously enormously famous and sophisticated in the media, but he got this right away. The Ukrainian billionaire gives $25 million to Hillary that disappears. They don't have to account for it. And that same guy gives $150,000 to Trump, so of course you land on Trump.
Ooh, wow. See, that's a thing.
Right. And
why are they not investigating this?
they have to. And at this stage, it's kind of the point where they have to investigate why they didn't investigate.
Right.
It's not simply to get to the truth. We got to understand. Look at this one picture that Rush puts up here. There is no such thing as the Clinton Global Initiative legally. There never was. There never will be. It's a fiction. It's a bad fiction. It's a horror story. There's never been any. They did not do the paperwork properly on this fake grifters initiative, and they've never reported on it properly. They've never solicited for it properly. They've never accounted for it properly. But yet, you know, it lives.
Well, look at how proud they are of themselves, smiling.
Yeah, they're probably sitting there saying, we got these suckers to say they're going to give us $4 billion. We can take at least half of that.
He looks like he's getting ready to bite her and put some ice on it. Phil.
Thanks for that.
It's all right.
So anyway, there is, this is really the final one here. We have got to get behind this writer here, Christina Lala or whatever her name is. She does good work. We have got to get behind what really was happening with this unmasking. What was Samantha Power really doing, or what were people doing in the name of Samantha Power to spread files around the government deep state universe once Trump won and after he won, to foment the resistance. And how much of that work was done, financed by the U.S. taxpayer? I mean, I think it is absolutely wrong, and it's certainly illegal, I would hope, for government employees to be engaging in brazen political partisan activities using U.S. taxpayer funds. And that, it seems to be no clearer case of that would lie in the track record that you would see starting, before the election, but certainly the morning where it was determined that Donald Trump won. We need to go back over that ground with objective people who are numerate, who can, good fraud detectors, not people like, non-law enforcement officers or people who decide their mission is not to enforce the laws. Let's go and have people who have the same sharp eye that would look at Corinne Brown and say, you know what, 800,000 charity fraud, 5 years in prison. Not, you've only stole 100 billion. What's 100 billion? There are other dictators who've stolen more than 100 billion. We'll let you off. Yeah. Just give me my slice.
Law obstruction officers.
Right. So this is a world record, Jason. We are very close.
2
on
hours
the
and
money.
1 minute.
Yeah, almost on the money here.
There you go, Sean. Well, it was a comprehensive presentation. I apologize if my humor was a little bit loopy. I got in from D.C. very late last night, but it's always stunning, Charles. I mean, it's at a certain point we were sort of, jocular about it and everything, but I'm not really a huge Rush Limbaugh fan, but that was a really excellent point that he brought up there. You got the same guy donating to both, and they're investigating Trump and not the Clintons.
Right. It's just, it simply isn't right. And I think the people who've now been at this for, could be 30 years, 35, 40 years, it's a comfortable life. You go to these elite schools, you play the game, your wife gets a job, you get a job, you get some sweetheart investment deals.
Porsche,
you get a Porsche, you get a cut rate mortgage, your kids get into the right camps and schools and country clubs or whatever. You get a book deal like Comey, and you're not a billionaire, but you're very wealthy, and you're also on the inside.
Right.
And
nothing can happen to you.
Nothing, in theory, can happen to you, and you have access to these databases, official government databases that no one's monitoring closely enough, and then the unofficial databases. Your friends set up private security firms that you can then consult for after you retire from government, make a lot of money doing
GoFundMe accounts that they put money into after you get fired.
Right. I mean, and this is a world that is threatened by Donald Trump, and it's really more threatened by, I would argue, the vast horde of American people on the right and the left who are not part of this. The Bernie people who were duped, frankly, maybe willingly, by Bernie. I mean, Bernie talked a lot of happy horse pappy, we will say, as opposed to the other word. And Donald Trump is out there disrupting. An overwhelming majority of Americans and people in the bigger economies want to see the status quo disrupted, not for anarchy, but
although there are anarchists out there
who will take advantage of this. But I mean, an overwhelming majority of people in these economies that are bigger and where people are far wealthier than they are in, let's say, poor parts of Asia, Africa, and South America, want to see a safe society, an ordered society where you're free to express your opinions, where you're free to make a living, you're free to build your family.
And not be attacked for doing that. Did you know that the Becks, Jared Beck posted on Twitter or Facebook that he's leaving social media. They returned from a vacation in South Korea. Their house had been vandalized. They have 2 young children.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And that's the type of criminal.
And these people think it's funny.
Well,
publish my parents' phone number on the internet and encourage people to harass them. That's the same person who held up a sign at a college protest imploring the college students to kill all police. That person is a disgraceful danger to the public and should be in jail.
Yeah, I would hope that person will be prosecuted and put in jail. Be a good thing.
It would. Well, Charles, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much for a really comprehensive and excellent presentation. I just want to remind people that Crowdsource the Truth is a community-sponsored show, news resource. If you enjoy it, please become a sponsor, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I am going to be implementing a new live streaming service for Patreon customers only, for the sponsors that support the show financially. It'll be the same content that people can currently get on Periscope and YouTube and Facebook. But as we continue to be suppressed by, really it seems to be malicious groups of morons who know how to take advantage of the lax policies and the weak policies. I can't say that I have any information that leads me to believe that I or you or this channel has been specifically targeted by Google. I do have information that seems to indicate that it is a dedicated group of malicious individuals who understand how to game the system, how to create channels that complement each other, have each other as guests, become this sort of pseudo network of channels that can use really unscrupulous business practices where if you're not in that network or one of their friends or sharing the same fake information that they share, they spread false information about you, defamatory information, they strike the videos, they make threats, they do all kinds of cowardly things. And you know, I think just like the Clintons, they think they can continue to get away with this stuff, but I am just going to become more and more creative and more aggressive in my pursuit of justice by contacting law enforcement, by saving all of this evidence, by connecting the dots, by observing that these people are clearly working together. And for the people that are in that network of channels that complement each other and make money by doing this and try to suppress, crowdsource the truth with these strikes, who continue to demonstrate that behavior quite clearly in the steemit.com network, which so far all the evidence that I've seen indicates that steemit.com is a scam being protected by some of the same people who are bringing fraudulent lawsuits against me, who seem to be also fraudulently involving the same people who want people to kill the police. You guys are on the wrong side of this. The best thing to do is stop, give it up, or keep going, and I will get you prosecuted. It will happen. Anyway, that's what's going to happen, Charles.
All right, good.
We'll talk about Sunday, and hopefully we'll have a Sunday with Charles here, or perhaps something else will happen.
All right, very good.
Very good. Take care, Charles. We'll see everybody tomorrow.